Okay, we are ready to start putting our quilt top together, and you will notice, if you've been following along, that all of a sudden I have different colors here. And this is actually the original that we used in the store. And obviously also, if you've been following along, we're a couple of weeks late getting these up. So rather than waiting for me to get everything put together, we're just going to go ahead and show you how to put this together using the original quilt. So this one is an on-point setting, but you actually piece it in straight rows. These should all be 12.5-inch blocks that are going to finish 12, but that is a perfect world measurement, and my world is not always perfect. So I actually go back and I measure all of my blocks to see what the average measurement is. And that doesn't mean that I take all 7 blocks and add them together and divide by 7 to come up with my average. It's whatever dimension I happen to have the most of is what I consider the average measurement of my blocks. So I will be putting sashing on the quilt first, and we'll have 2 rows that have 2 blocks and 1 row that has 3 blocks. And you will be cutting 4 sashing strips that are 2.5 inches wide by whatever the average measurement of your block is. And you will be piecing a row, a block, a sashing strip, a block, and a sashing strip. You'll make 2 of those. Then we will be adding a setting triangle to the ends of both of those. And the setting triangle you will get by cutting a 20 and an 1/8 inch square and cutting an X on it, and that's going to yield 4 triangles, and you will only be using 2 of those. But it puts the straight grain of the triangle on the outside edge, which is what you want to the outside edge of your quilt. You will also, after you piece this row, before you add the setting triangle, you will measure, and you're going to cut another 2.5-inch strip, and you're going to put it on right here. So this part, add this, then add your setting triangle. Okay? Your center row gets a block, sashing strip, block, sashing strip, block. Okay? Then you will measure these 3 together, and you'll cut 2 pieces. One will go on the top of it. The other one is going to go on this side. Okay? Then you will take and sew these 3 rows together with setting triangle, actually you're sewing these 2, and then you're adding a piece here, then you're sewing this row on, and then you are sewing a piece down here. It's a little bit different than most settings because it is only 7 blocks. So 1 row, this row is identical, and then you're adding the center. You will be adding sashing, measuring what you need to add on to those to complete that center. Then, to square it off, while I unfold here, you will be cutting 2 large squares and cutting those in half to give you the corners. And the dimension for those squares, you're cutting 2 22 1/8 and cutting them in half. Okay? And they are going to give you a rectangular center. We're actually combining 2 weeks. So last week you would have gotten your quilt out to this rectangular piece. Now we need to start adding borders. We actually want to let the center float just a little bit in here, give it a little bit of breathing room. So we are cutting 2.5-inch strips from the same fabric that we used for setting triangles to do the first border. What we want to do here is measure the opposite sides of the quilt down the center, take an average measurement, and cut 2 borders that length. You will find the center point of the side of your quilt, match it to the center point of your border, pin at the center, pin at the ends, put lots of pins in between, and sew those borders on. Then you'll repeat the process, measuring top and bottom and through the center, getting an average, and sewing those on. Then we have 2 borders that we are cutting 1.5, these will finish 1 inch, from the sashing fabric. We're going to do the same thing for this first one. Measure the length, take an average, sew those sides on, repeat for the top and bottom. Then we have a pieced border, which I'm going to explain how to do in just a minute, and then you will repeat the process here with the other one, measuring the quilt center, cutting the pieces to fit that, sewing them on sides and top and bottom, and next week we're going to do this mitered border. But let me show you how we're doing this pieced border. We actually, or if you've been doing it with the class, you have a lot of strips and pieces left over. So what you want to do is take about 6 pieces, 6 to 8, cut strips, and I vary the width of these, and I do that on purpose because that way it doesn't matter how long my quilt is. I just piece a whole bunch of things end to end, sew them on, and, well, measure, cut my piece, but it doesn't matter where I cut this because I have varying widths. If I have something skinny down here, it really doesn't matter. But this is a 3-inch finish, so we're cutting 3.5-inch strips. And I like to use my shape cut, and I'm putting the 0 line on the outside edge here. And if it's bowing just a little bit, I can actually wiggle this a little bit so that I have a straight line with the outside edge. I'm cutting 3.5-inch pieces. So I want to straighten off this outside edge first. So I'm cutting on my 0 line here, and I usually lift to be sure that I actually got a cut all the way across. Then I have to be able to count in 3.5s. So my 3.5, followed by 7, followed by 10.5. Then I'm moving these, setting this down again. And this will, the 0 line should snug up. Again, I have my straight line here. And again, 3.5, 7, and 10.5. So out of this particular strip set, I got 6 pieces. Now I actually used a lot of different fabrics in this quilt, so I will do a variety of strip sets using up the fabrics that I have left over. Then I'll take these and I will piece them end to end with different fabrics, like so. And then I will measure and cut and sew that on. When I sew this on, because this has so many seams in it, it tends to shift just or move a little bit, stretch a little bit. So I will actually have this on the bottom next to my feed dogs with the quilt on top. And I realize that is a little bit awkward, but it will keep this border from stretching and moving on you, and it will be a much easier sewing time. When you are pressing the seams on the quilt, you will be pressing always towards a plain border. So this one, you press towards this border, you press towards this border. When you put this guy on, you're pressing this way. When you put this one on, you're pressing this way. So you're not ever pressing back against all these seam allowances, and with any luck, you'll be in a little better shape than I am, and you'll have this done by next week. But if not, you at least have the instructions, and we will do the mitered border next week.